The moment before Simone's hands connected with her back, Naomi saw something in her husband's eyes that would haunt her forever. Not shock, not horror, just cold calculation. Then she was flying forward into the screaming metal and glass of downtown traffic. The impact came from the left. A silver sedan. The sound was worse than the pain, metal crushing against bone, brakes shrieking, people screaming. Naomi's body rolled across the hood, her head cracking against the windshield before she tumbled to the asphalt. The world spun in fragments, blue sky, gray pavement, blood. So much blood. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard Simone's voice, high and panicked. Oh my God. It was an accident. She just stepped back. Accident. The word echoed in Naomi's fading consciousness. No. Those hands had been deliberate, forceful, murderous. 2 hours earlier, Naomi had been sitting in her downtown penthouse, staring at a text message that had shattered her world. Your husband is with me right now. Room 2847, Grandview Hotel. Come see for yourself. The message came from an unknown number, but it included a photo that left no doubt. Brandon, her husband of 8 years, wrapped around a blonde woman in a hotel robe. Naomi's hands had trembled as she'd grabbed her keys and purse. Part of her wanted to ignore it, pretend she'd never seen it. But another part, the part she'd buried for years under the role of dutiful wife, demanded the truth. She'd driven to the Grandview Hotel in a daze, her heart pounding. Brandon had been in the lobby when she'd arrived. He'd looked startled, then annoyed. Before she could speak, the blonde woman had appeared, walking toward them with the confidence of someone who believed she'd already won. She was younger than Naomi by at least 5 years, with perfect skin and designer clothes that screamed money she hadn't earned herself. Naomi, Brandon had said, his voice flat. We should talk about this privately. You think? Naomi had shot back, her voice shakier than she'd wanted. How long? The blonde woman had smiled, actually smiled. 6 months. I'm Simone, by the way. Since we're all being honest now. That's when something inside Naomi had snapped. Not into rage but into clarity. She'd seen it all suddenly, the late nights Brandon claimed were business meetings. The distance in his touch. The way he'd encouraged her to quit her law career to support him, and then gradually made her feel useless without him. This wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness. This was planned. Calculated. 6 months, Naomi had repeated, looking at Brandon. Were you ever going to tell me? Brandon had glanced around the hotel lobby, clearly uncomfortable with the public setting. Let's go outside. That had been his first mistake. Taking this conversation to the street. They'd walked out onto the busy downtown sidewalk, all three of them, like some twisted parody of civilized adults handling a difficult situation. Pedestrians streamed past. Cars rushed by on the street. The afternoon sun had been bright and warm, completely at odds with the ice spreading through Naomi's chest. I want a divorce, Brandon had said simply. We can handle this quietly. I'll be fair about the settlement. Fair. The word had almost made Naomi laugh. She'd given up everything for this man. Her career as a corporate attorney at one of the city's top firms. Her independence. Her friends, most of whom had gradually drifted away as she'd become Mrs. Brandon Whitmore, wife of the billionaire tech mogul, instead of Naomi Fletcher, the brilliant lawyer who'd never lost a case. Fair, Naomi had repeated. You're having an affair and you think you get to decide what's fair? Simone had stepped closer then, and Naomi had seen something dangerous in her eyes. He's already decided. This is just a formality. Why don't you make this easy on everyone? Make it easy? Naomi's voice had risen. You want me to make it easy for you to steal my husband? I didn't steal anything, Simone had hissed. He came to me willingly. Maybe if you'd been more interesting, more successful, more anything, he wouldn't have needed to look elsewhere. The words had stung, designed to cut deep into every insecurity Brandon had helped create over the years. Naomi had felt tears burning her eyes, but she'd refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of them. Simone, Brandon had said, his tone warning. But there'd been something else in his voice. Not disapproval. Permission maybe. Or agreement. Naomi had turned to walk away. She'd needed space, air, distance from both of them. That's when Simone had moved. The push wasn't a shove or an angry bump. It was two-handed, forceful, aimed at the center of Naomi's back. Naomi had felt herself propelled forward off the curb directly into the street where cars rushed past at 40 miles per hour. The sedan's driver had never had a chance to stop. Now, lying on the pavement with her vision dimming, Naomi heard sirens approaching. She tried to move but her body wouldn't respond. Everything hurt but distant, like the pain belonged to someone else. Brandon. Simone's voice again, still high with fake panic. Brandon, we need to call an ambulance. This is terrible. Then Brandon's voice, closer to Naomi's head. He must have knelt down. But his words weren't for her. They were for Simone, low and urgent. Calm down. Let them think it was an accident. Just stick to the story. Stick to the story. Through her fading consciousness, Naomi understood. This wasn't an accident at all. And Brandon had known it would happen. The last thing she heard before darkness took her was Simone's whispered response. This actually works out perfectly. Now we don't need to wait for a divorce. The steady beep of hospital monitors dragged Naomi back to consciousness. Everything hurt. Her head throbbed with each heartbeat. Her left arm was casted. Her ribs screamed with every breath. But she was alive. She kept her eyes closed, listening. Footsteps. The rustle of clothing. Someone was in the room with her. She's been unconscious for 18 hours. Brandon's voice. He sounded tired. Maybe even concerned. The doctor said there's no brain damage, but they want to keep her sedated for a few more days. And after that? Simone's voice made Naomi's blood run cold. The woman who tried to kill her was here. In her hospital room. After that, we play the concerned spouse, Brandon said. I visit. I worry. I make sure everyone sees how devastated I am. Then, when she's recovered enough, we proceed with the divorce quietly. She'll be too traumatized to fight. You think she knows? Simone asked. That it wasn't an accident? She was flying into traffic. She doesn't know anything. Naomi forced herself to remain perfectly still. Her heart rate monitor could give her away if she panicked, so she focused on keeping her breathing steady and shallow. They thought she was unconscious. Sedated. Unaware. What about the settlement? Simone pressed. I've already had my lawyers draw up papers. She'll get the penthouse and enough money to live comfortably, but nothing substantial. Most of my assets are already protected in corporate structures she doesn't understand. She used to be a lawyer, Simone said, doubt creeping into her voice. A small-time corporate attorney, 8 years out of practice. She doesn't have the spine for a real fight. She never did. That's why she gave it all up to play housewife. The contempt in his voice cut deeper than any physical injury. Naomi had loved this man. She trusted him with everything. We should go, Simone said. Before the nurse comes back. Remember, you're the devoted husband. Their footsteps receded. The door clicked shut. Only then did Naomi open her eyes. The private hospital room was quietly expensive, exactly the kind of place Brandon would insist on for appearances. Machines beeped around her. Lines ran into her arm. Through the window, she could see the city skyline under a gray afternoon sky. She wasn't dead. They tried, or at least allowed it to happen, and she wasn't dead. And now she knew the truth. Naomi's mind raced despite the pain medication dulling her senses. Brandon thought she was broken. Traumatized. Weak. He'd been thinking that for years, slowly convincing her to give up her career, her friends, her independence. But he'd forgotten something important. She'd been one of the best corporate attorneys in the city before she'd met him. She hadn't lost a case in 3 years. She'd specialized in hostile takeovers and asset protection. And now she remembered why. The door opened again. Naomi quickly closed her eyes. Girl, I know you're awake. Naomi's eyes snapped open. Tatiana stood in the doorway, her best friend from law school. They drifted apart over the years, but Tatiana's expression showed nothing but fierce loyalty. Tati, Naomi's voice came out rough, her throat dry. Don't try to talk yet. Tatiana moved to the bedside, her eyes scanning the monitors and Naomi's injuries. I heard about the accident. Came as soon as I could. But something doesn't feel right about this. It wasn't an accident, Naomi whispered. Tatiana went very still. What? His mistress pushed me. Into traffic. I heard them just now. They're planning to use this. To force me into a quiet divorce with nothing. His mistress. Tatiana's face hardened. Brandon has a mistress? Simone. 6 months. Each word hurt, but Naomi pushed through. I need your help. Anything. I need to see my old files. From before I quit. There's something I remember about Brandon's company formation. Something important. Tatiana pulled out her phone. What am I looking for? When Brandon started his company 10 years ago, I helped him structure it. I was dating him then, just starting my career. He needed legal help and couldn't afford a big firm. I did it for free, but I insisted on terms to protect myself. Find the original incorporation documents. There should be an ownership clause. Understanding dawned on Tatiana's face. You own part of his company. 40%. He bought out most of my shares early on, but there was a clause. If we married, my remaining shares would vest immediately. He was so in love back then he didn't think twice. But I bet he's forgotten all about it. How much are those shares worth now? Naomi managed a small smile despite the pain. His company is valued at $3 billion. You do the math. Tatiana let out a low whistle. Girl, you're not just a millionaire. You're a billionaire. I'm a billionaire he tried to kill, Naomi corrected. And I'm going to make them both regret ever knowing my name. What do you need me to do? First, don't let anyone know I'm fully conscious. I need to seem more injured than I am. Second, get me those incorporation documents and have them verified. Third, find me Gerald Hayes. The divorce attorney? The one they call the Destroyer? That's the one. He's expensive. I can afford it now. Naomi shifted slightly in the hospital bed, wincing. And Toddy? I need everything we can find on Simone. Everything. Where she works, where she came from, her connection to Brandon. I want to know if this was just an affair or something more calculated. Tatiana nodded grimly. I'm on it. But you need to rest for real. Your body is seriously damaged. Broken arm, 3 cracked ribs, severe concussion. You're not faking being hurt. I know. But they think I'm broken in here too. Naomi tapped her temple carefully. That's where they're wrong. I've just been asleep. Now I'm wide awake. Over the next 3 days, Naomi played her role perfectly. When nurses checked on her, she seemed groggy and confused. When doctors asked questions, she answered slowly as if struggling to remember. When Brandon visited with flowers and false concern, she watched him through half-closed eyes and said nothing. But privately, with Tatiana's help, she worked. The incorporation documents were exactly where she'd remembered, stored in a secure file at her old law firm. The ownership clause was valid. And Tatiana discovered something even more interesting. Simone had been an employee at Brandon's company. A junior marketing manager he'd promoted rapidly over 6 months, giving her access to confidential information, private meetings, and resources far beyond her experience level. It looked exactly like what it was. A man moving his mistress into position while moving his wife out. But there was more. Financial records showed Brandon had been shifting money into offshore accounts for the past year. Not illegal necessarily, but suspicious and sloppy. He'd left trails that a first-year lawyer could follow. He'd gotten arrogant, comfortable. He thought Naomi was no threat at all. On the 4th day, Gerald Hayes came to visit. He was 50, silver-haired, and had a reputation for destroying wealthy spouses who tried to hide assets. He sat beside Naomi's bed and listened to everything. When she finished, he smiled. Mrs. Whitmore, I'd be honored to represent you. Your husband is about to learn a very expensive lesson. I want more than money, Naomi said quietly. I want his reputation destroyed. I want his business exposed. I want everyone to know what he did. That, Gerald said, is exactly my specialty. 10 years earlier. Naomi Fletcher sat in the cramped coffee shop near the courthouse, reviewing contracts for a case that would define her early career. She was 26, freshly made junior partner at Caldwell & Associates, and hungry to prove she belonged among the city's legal elite. Is this seat taken? She'd looked up to see a man about her age, handsome in an eager, slightly disheveled way. He carried a laptop bag and had the desperate energy of someone trying to build something from nothing. It's all yours, she'd said, returning to her papers. He'd sat down, ordered coffee, and opened his laptop. For 20 minutes, they'd worked in comfortable silence. Then he'd cursed softly. Everything okay? She'd asked. Legal documents, he'd said, frustrated. I'm trying to incorporate a startup, but these forms might as well be in ancient Greek. She'd smiled. I'm a corporate attorney. Want me to take a look? That conversation had changed everything. His name was Brandon Whitmore, and he had a brilliant idea for software that would revolutionize project management. He had technical skills, business vision, and absolutely no money for proper legal representation. Naomi had helped him anyway, charmed by his passion and intelligence. They'd started dating 3 months later. She'd helped him structure his company properly, protecting intellectual property and setting up ownership in a way that would attract investors. When he'd proposed marriage after 2 years, she'd said yes without hesitation. Looking back now from her hospital bed, Naomi could see how carefully he'd played her. The romantic gestures that always came when she was close to a big case. The suggestions that she was working too hard. The subtle implications that her career was causing problems in their relationship. "You're so tired all the time," he'd say. "When was the last time you took a vacation? You spend more time with your clients than with me. Don't you want to have children someday? How will you manage that with 70-hour work weeks?" She'd cut back her hours first. Then she'd turn down a promotion that would have made her the youngest senior partner in the firm's history. Then finally, 3 years into their marriage, she'd quit entirely. "Just for a while," Brandon had said. "Until my company stabilizes. I need you to be my partner in this, not distracted by other people's problems." She'd believed him. She believed in their partnership. But that partnership had been a lie. Present day. "The documents are clear," Tatiana said, spreading papers across the rolling hospital table. "When you married, your vested shares were locked in. You own 40% of Whitmore Tech current valuation, $1.2 billion. Naomi stared at the numbers. She'd known intellectually what those shares meant, but seeing it in black and white was different. "He hasn't touched this paperwork in years," Tatiana continued. "Probably forgot it existed. He's been operating under the assumption that he owns the company outright except for investor shares." "Has he tried to sell or transfer anything lately?" Naomi asked. "That's where it gets interesting." Tatiana pulled out another file. 3 months ago, he started talking to a venture capital firm about selling the company. The deal was worth $3 billion. He would have walked away with most of that after paying out investors. But the deal required proof of clear ownership. When his lawyers started doing due diligence, they would have discovered your shares. "That's why he wanted the divorce," Naomi said, understanding flooding through her. "He needed me out of the way before the sale went through. And if you were severely injured or traumatized, you'd be more likely to sign whatever he put in front of you without fighting. Or if I was dead, he'd inherit my shares." The words tasted bitter. Tatiana's expression turned grim. "That push wasn't random, Naomi. Simone didn't just lose her temper. This was planned. Can we prove it?" "Working on it. But here's what we do know. Simone worked at Whitmore Tech for only 8 months before the affair started. She was hired specifically by Brandon, bypassing normal HR procedures. Her background is thin. No real experience in marketing, but suddenly she's running major campaigns. She's not there for her marketing skills," Naomi said. "Right. And get this, I pulled her financial records. She got a $50,000 cash deposit 2 weeks before the incident. No documentation. Just cash." Naomi felt cold. "He paid her." "Can't prove it yet, but it looks that way." A nurse entered to check Naomi's vitals, and both women fell silent. When she left, Naomi turned to Tatiana with new determination. "I need out of this hospital." "How soon?" "The doctors want you here another week." "I don't have a week. Brandon is going to start pushing for a settlement soon, and I need to be ready. Can you arrange a private recovery facility? Somewhere he doesn't know about?" "I can do that. And I need to meet with Gerald again. We need to file before Brandon realizes I'm not broken." Tatiana squeezed her hand gently. "You're sure about this? Once we file, there's no going back. It's going to get ugly." "They tried to kill me, Tati. It doesn't get uglier than that." "Fair point." Over the next 2 days they planned carefully. Tatiana arranged for a private recovery facility in a neighboring town, registered under a false name. She also brought Naomi clean clothes, a burner phone, and copies of all the documents they'd gathered. Gerald Hayes visited again, this time with his full team. They reviewed everything: the ownership documents, the suspicious financial transfers, Simone's background and the cash payment, the witness statements from the street. "We have enough for a strong divorce filing," Gerald said. "The ownership issue alone will shock him. But if you want to pursue criminal charges, that's trickier. We have circumstantial evidence, but proving conspiracy to commit assault is difficult." "Start with the divorce," Naomi said. "Hit him where he thinks he's protected. Once his world starts crumbling, people will talk. Employees who've seen things. Business partners who've been suspicious. We just need to crack the surface." "You think like a prosecutor," Gerald observed. "I was trained by the best." On her 6th day in the hospital, Naomi executed her disappearance. Tatiana arranged for a discharge during shift change, when the hospital was chaotic and no one would notice one patient leaving early. An unmarked car took Naomi to the recovery facility, a converted mansion that specialized in discreet recuperation for wealthy clients. Brandon would discover her gone within hours. She wanted him off balance, worried, unsure. Let him wonder if she knew. Let him sweat. In her new room, surrounded by medical equipment and legal documents, Naomi began the real work. She reviewed every paper Gerald's team had prepared. She practiced her testimony for the depositions that would come. She forced her injured body through physical therapy, knowing she'd need her strength for the battles ahead. And she remembered who she'd been before Brandon had convinced her to forget. She'd been brilliant, ruthless in the courtroom, undefeated. She'd just been asleep for 8 years. Now it was time to wake up and remind everyone what Naomi Fletcher could do when someone made her angry. Brandon and Simone had made a fatal mistake. They'd assumed she was weak because they'd spent years making her feel weak. They were about to learn the difference between being broken and biding your time. The private recovery facility's conference room became Naomi's war room. Gerald and his team had set up computers, document scanners, and a secure server. On the walls hung timelines, financial charts, and photographs. At the center of it all, Naomi sat with her arms still in a cast but her mind sharper than it had been in years. "We have 3 fronts," Gerald explained, pointing to the wall displays. "Financial, criminal, and reputational. We need all 3 to completely dismantle what he's built." "Show me the financial trail first," Naomi said. Gerald's junior associate, a sharp woman named Patricia, pulled up spreadsheets on the main screen. "Brandon has been moving money for 14 months. It started small, legitimate-looking transfers to international accounts for business development. But 6 months ago, right when the affair with Simone started, the amounts increased dramatically." "How much total?" Naomi asked. $27 million. Spread across accounts in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, and Singapore. Naomi felt a surge of satisfaction. "He's trying to hide assets before the divorce. But he's doing it sloppily." "Very sloppily," Patricia agreed. "He's using company accounts for personal transfers, which means he's committing corporate fraud. And he's not even hiding the paper trail well. It's like he's never expected anyone to look. Because he thought I'd just sign whatever he put in front of me," Naomi said bitterly. "What else?" "Simone's involvement is deeper than we thought." Patricia brought up another set of documents. "She's been signing off on these transfers. Her name appears on approval forms for transactions she had no business approving. She's a junior marketing manager, but she has access to CFO-level financial systems." "That's criminal conspiracy," Gerald said with satisfaction. "She's not just the mistress. She's an active participant in corporate fraud." Naomi leaned forward despite the pain in her ribs. "Can we prove she knew what she was doing?" "Her email correspondence makes it clear. Look at this." Patricia pulled up an email chain. "This is from 2 months ago. Simone to Brandon. Finished moving the last payment to the Singapore account. As discussed, I made sure to route it through the marketing budget so it looks like a vendor payment. That's deliberate, knowing fraud." "Beautiful," Naomi murmured. "What about the assault? Any progress there?" Gerald's expression turned serious. "That's harder. We have witness statements that confirm Simone pushed you. 3 different people saw it clearly. But proving premeditation is tougher. It's her word that it was an accident versus yours that it was intentional." "What about the conversation I overheard in the hospital?" Naomi asked. "When Brandon said to stick to the story?" "Helpful but not enough. It's hearsay since you were supposed to be unconscious. A defense attorney would shred it." "Then we need more." Naomi thought for a moment. "What about their communication? Text messages, emails, phone records?" "We've subpoenaed their phone records as part of the divorce proceedings," Gerald said. "But we can't access them yet. That'll take another week or 2. Too slow." Naomi made a decision. "I need to access Brandon's home office. There's a computer there he uses for personal correspondence. He never bothered with proper security because he trusted me not to snoop." "Naomi, you can't just break into your own house," Gerald warned. "It's my house too. I'm not breaking in. I'm retrieving my property." Tatiana, who'd been quiet until now, spoke up. "I'll go with you." "When?" "Tonight. Brandon's pattern is consistent. He goes to the office late on Wednesdays, usually doesn't get home until after midnight. That gives us hours." "This is a bad idea," Gerald said. "If you're caught, it could hurt the case." "If I'm not caught, it could win the case," Naomi countered. "Besides, I know that house inside and out. I know where he keeps everything. And I know he's gotten sloppy because he thinks I'm too traumatized to fight back." Gerald sighed. "If you're determined to do this, at least take precautions. Document everything. Don't take physical items if you can avoid it. Photograph or copy. And for God's sake, don't get caught." That night, Naomi and Tatiana drove to the penthouse in Tatiana's car. Naomi's body ached from the movement, but adrenaline kept her focused. She traded her hospital gown for dark clothes and comfortable shoes. Her cast made her left arm awkward, but her right hand was steady as she used her key to access the building's private elevator. "You're sure he's not home?" Tatiana whispered as they rode up. "He posted a photo at a restaurant downtown 20 minutes ago. It's a 30-minute drive from there minimum. We have time." The penthouse was exactly as she'd left it. Expensive furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, art on the walls that Brandon had chosen to impress clients. It had never really felt like home, Naomi realized. It had felt like a showroom. "His office is this way." She led Tatiana down the hall to a room she'd rarely entered during their marriage. Brandon had claimed he needed privacy for important business calls. Now she understood he'd needed privacy for calls with Simone. The computer wasn't password protected. Another sign of his arrogance. Naomi sat down carefully and began searching files. "What are we looking for?" Tatiana asked, standing guard at the door. "Anything that proves coordination between him and Simone, especially around the day of the incident." It took 15 minutes of searching, but she found it. A folder labeled Personal that contained email exchanges between Brandon and Simone going back 8 months. The early messages were romantic, then sexual, then increasingly practical. And then, 3 weeks before the incident, the tone changed. "Brandon, she's going to be a problem with the sale. We need to handle this." "Simone, what do you want me to do?" "Brandon, make it impossible for her to fight. If she's dealing with trauma, she won't have the energy or clarity to contest anything." "Simone, how severe are we talking?" "Brandon, severe enough that she can't function normally for months. But nothing that would raise questions." "Simone, I might have an idea. Let me think about it." And then, the day before the incident. "Simone, I know how to handle the problem. Trust me. Just make sure you're with her tomorrow at noon downtown. I'll take care of the rest." "Brandon, are you sure?" "Simone, I'm sure. After this, she won't be able to fight anything." Naomi's hands shook as she photographed every message with her phone. This was it. Proof of premeditation. Proof that they'd planned to hurt her severely enough to eliminate her as an obstacle. "We need to go," Tatiana urged. "You've been on that computer for 25 minutes. Almost done." Naomi found more files. Financial records Brandon had kept on his personal computer, showing the full scope of his hidden assets. Business emails that revealed questionable dealings with partners. Evidence of bribery to secure contracts. He'd kept everything, assuming no one would ever see it. She copied it all to a secure cloud drive, using her own credentials that Brandon didn't know existed. "Naomi, we really need to leave now," Tatiana said urgently. Okay. Naomi closed the programs, careful to leave no trace that she'd been there. She stood, took one last look around the office and followed Tatiana to the door. They were in the elevator when Naomi's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "I know what you're doing. Be careful." She showed it to Tatiana, who frowned. "Who's that from?" "I don't know. But someone's watching." Back at the recovery facility, Gerald reviewed the photographs Naomi had taken. His expression shifted from professional satisfaction to actual excitement as he read through the messages. "This is it," he said. "This is criminal conspiracy to commit assault. This is premeditation. This is enough to destroy them both." "Can we use it?" Naomi asked. "Since I got it from his personal computer?" "You accessed your own home with your own key. You didn't hack anything or break any locks. And you photographed documents rather than taking them. A judge might not love it, but it's admissible. Especially since it proves a serious crime." "So what now?" Gerald smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Now we file everything at once. The divorce with your ownership claims. The evidence of fraud. The evidence of conspiracy to commit assault. We hit him with all of it before he knows what's happening." "When?" "Tomorrow morning. I want this filed before Brandon even knows you're conscious and planning. The element of surprise is crucial." Naomi nodded. "Do it." That night she barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Simone's hands on her back, felt the push, heard the screaming of brakes. But now those memories had a different quality. They weren't just trauma. They were evidence. Tomorrow everyone would know the truth. Tomorrow the revenge began. The news hit Brandon's office at 9:30 a.m. on a Thursday. One moment he was reviewing quarterly projections with his CFO, and the next his secretary was rushing in with a legal document that would change everything. Naomi knew this because Tatiana had someone watching the office. The report came through within minutes. Brandon had gone white, then red, then started making frantic phone calls. "He's calling his lawyers," Tatiana reported, reading from her phone. 3 different firms in the past 10 minutes. He looks panicked. Good, Naomi thought. Let him panic. The filing had been comprehensive. Divorce proceedings citing infidelity and abuse. Activation of her ownership shares, effectively making her co-owner of his company and freezing any major transactions without her approval. A motion to freeze all accounts pending investigation of fraud. And a referral to the district attorney's office regarding conspiracy to commit assault, with all the evidence attached. Gerald had called it a nuclear option. Naomi called it justice. What about Simone? Naomi asked. She's been summoned to Brandon's office. Should be arriving any minute. Naomi wished she could be a fly on that wall. The two of them had thought they were so clever, so careful. Now their whole conspiracy was exposed in black and white. Her phone rang. Brandon's number. She let it go to voicemail. He called again. And again. 5 times in 10 minutes. Finally he left a message. Naomi, I don't know what's going on or who's advising you, but this is insane. We need to talk. These accusations are completely false. Please call me back. She deleted it without responding. An hour later her phone rang from an unknown number. She answered. You're making a huge mistake. Simone's voice tight with anger. You think you can destroy us with lies? Brandon will fight this. We both will. Good luck with that, Naomi said calmly. I have your emails. All of them. Including the ones where you two planned to hurt me. Silence on the other end. Then, those messages were taken out of context. You can't prove anything. The DA seems to think otherwise. You should probably get yourself a good criminal attorney. You're going to need one. Simone hung up. Naomi smiled. First blood drawn. Over the next few days the situation escalated rapidly. Brandon tried everything. He called, texted, had friends reach out, even showed up at their penthouse hoping to find her. But Naomi was still at the recovery facility, hidden away where he couldn't reach her. The media caught wind of the story. Tech billionaire Brandon Whitmore accused of fraud and conspiracy, read the headline in the city's major business publication. The article was carefully worded to avoid libel, but it laid out the basic facts. A contentious divorce, serious accusations of financial wrongdoing and allegations of a planned assault. Brandon's board of directors called an emergency meeting. Investors started asking questions. Several major clients put their contracts on hold pending the outcome of the investigation. His empire was beginning to crack. You need to see this, Tatiana said, bringing her laptop to where Naomi sat doing physical therapy exercises. She pulled up a social media post from one of Brandon's business partners. After careful consideration, I'm severing my relationship with Whitmore Tech. Recent allegations have revealed a pattern of behavior incompatible with my values. I wish everyone involved a fair resolution. They're running, Naomi observed, like rats from a sinking ship. 3 more partners have issued similar statements. His company's stock is down 18%. Naomi felt a complicated mix of emotions. Part of her was satisfied to see Brandon's world crumbling. But another part remembered the company they'd built together, back when she'd still believed in their partnership. Any response from him? She asked. He issued a statement denying everything. Claims you're emotionally unstable from the accident and being manipulated by aggressive lawyers. Says the financial transactions were all legitimate business dealings and you're misunderstanding them because you don't have current business experience. Naomi laughed harshly. He's still trying to paint me as the incompetent housewife. It's not working. His own CFO just resigned. Put out a statement saying he can no longer support the company's financial practices. That was significant. A CFO resigning with that language meant serious problems. Other business people would know to stay away. What about Simone? She's lawyered up. Some hotshot criminal defense attorney from Chicago. But here's the interesting part. She's trying to distance herself from Brandon. Her attorney put out a statement saying she was an employee following orders from her superior and had no knowledge of any wrongdoing. She's flipping on him, Naomi realized. Looks that way. We're trying to. But she's the one who physically pushed you, so her exposure is higher. The DA is taking this seriously. There's talk of actual charges. Naomi's phone buzzed with a message from Gerald. Need you at my office. Important development. She arrived an hour later, moving more easily now that her body was healing. Gerald's conference room was full of his team, all looking excited. What's happened? Naomi asked. 2 things. First, the DA is filing criminal charges against both Brandon and Simone. Conspiracy to commit assault, fraud, and a few other things. It's a major case, front page news. Naomi felt a rush of vindication. They're actually charging them. Second thing is even better. Remember how we couldn't access their phone records right away? Well, the criminal investigation changed that. The DA subpoenaed everything. And we found gold. Gerald pulled up a series of text messages on his screen. Simone to Brandon, the morning of the incident. Today's the day. Are you ready for this? Brandon, are you sure this is the only way? Simone, you said you needed her out of the picture. I'm making it happen. Just trust me. Brandon, okay. But it has to look accidental. Simone, it will. I promise. By tonight, she won't be a problem anymore. That's premeditation, Naomi whispered. Clear and undeniable. It gets better. After the incident, they exchanged more messages. Brandon to Simone from the hospital. Think she knows? Simone, no way. She was barely conscious when they loaded her into the ambulance. Even if she remembers being pushed, she'll think it was an accident. Brandon, good. Stay away from the hospital for a few days. Don't want anyone connecting us. Simone, already ahead of you. This is going to work out perfectly. Just a few more weeks and she'll sign whatever we put in front of her. They're done, Gerald said with satisfaction. These messages alone would convict them. But we have everything else too. The financial fraud, the ownership deception, all of it. Naomi, you've won. But Naomi didn't feel like celebrating yet. She thought about Brandon's face when he'd knelt beside her on the street, not checking if she was okay but whispering to Simone about maintaining their story. She thought about 8 years of marriage, of slowly being convinced to give up everything that made her strong. I don't want them to just lose, she said quietly. I want them to understand what they took from me. I want them to feel what I felt lying on that street, believing I was going to die while my husband stood over me planning how to benefit from it. They're going to prison, Gerald said. That's significant punishment. Maybe. But I want more. I want his company. I want his reputation destroyed so completely that no one will ever trust him again. I want Simone to spend the rest of her life knowing she threw everything away for a man who would have sacrificed her the moment it benefited him. Tatiana put a hand on Naomi's shoulder. We're going to get you all of that. But first, you need to actually face them. The divorce proceedings start in 2 weeks. You'll have to be in the same room with Brandon. Naomi took a breath. I'm ready. Are you? Really? I survived being thrown into traffic. I survived hearing my husband plan to exploit my trauma. I survived 8 years of being made to feel small. Yes, Tati. I'm ready. That night, back at the recovery facility, Naomi stood at the window looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Brandon was scrambling, probably still believing he could salvage something from this disaster. Simone was probably turning on him, trying to save herself. But Naomi had already won the part that mattered most. She'd reclaimed herself. She'd remembered who she was before Brandon had convinced her to forget. The rest was just cleanup. Her phone buzzed. Another unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Mrs. Whitmore? An unfamiliar voice, female, nervous. You don't know me. I'm Rachel. I work at Whitmore Tech. I just wanted you to know. Brandon's been doing this for years. There were other women before Simone. All of us young, all of us promoted too fast. He uses people. I was too scared to say anything before, but now that you're fighting back, I wanted you to know you're not alone. There are others who will testify if you need us. Naomi felt tears prick her eyes for the first time since the incident. Not tears of pain or fear, but of recognition. She wasn't alone. There were others who'd been hurt by Brandon's manipulations. Thank you for calling, Rachel, she said. And yes, we're going to need all the testimony we can get. After hanging up, Naomi texted Gerald. We need to reach out to former employees. There's a pattern here. We can prove systematic abuse of power. His response came immediately. Already on it. 3 other women have reached out today. This is bigger than we thought. Good, Naomi thought. Let it all come out. Let everyone see exactly who Brandon Whitmore really is. The disappearance was over. She'd hidden long enough, healed enough, gathered enough evidence. Now it was time to appear in court and watch Brandon's world burn. The morning the full divorce filing hit public record, Naomi was in Gerald's office watching the news coverage on 3 different screens. The story had grown far beyond a simple divorce. It was now a scandal involving corporate fraud, conspiracy, assault, and a pattern of abuse that spanned years. Whitmore Tech stock plummets as CEO faces criminal charges, read one headline. Silicon Valley billionaire's empire crumbles under allegations of fraud and violence, read another. The third screen showed Brandon leaving his office building, surrounded by reporters shouting questions. He looked haggard, older than his 42 years. He held up a hand to block cameras and said nothing as his lawyer guided him to a waiting car. "He's refusing all interviews," Gerald noted. "Smart legally but terrible for his public image." "What about his business partners?" Naomi asked. "4 major partners have pulled out completely. The rest are in wait-and-see mode. But here's what's really killing him. His investors are demanding an emergency audit of company finances. They want to know where all that money went." "How long until they discover the offshore accounts?" "They probably already have. The question is how they'll respond. If they sue him personally, it adds another layer of legal problems." Patricia entered the conference room carrying a thick folder. "The asset freeze is complete. Brandon has access to about $200,000 for living expenses and legal fees. Everything else is locked pending the outcome of the divorce." Naomi felt a savage satisfaction at that. 200,000 sounded like a lot, but for someone accustomed to Brandon's lifestyle, it was nothing. And his legal fees alone would eat through that in weeks. "What about the company?" she asked. "My 40% share? That's where it gets interesting." Gerald pulled up documents on the main screen. "As co-owner, you have the right to call for a board meeting and vote on major decisions. The other shareholders are actually relieved you've stepped forward. They see you as potentially more stable than Brandon right now." "They want me to take over," Naomi realized. "Not officially yet. But there's been talk. You're a lawyer, you understand corporate structures, and you're not currently facing criminal charges. From their perspective, you're the safer bet. I haven't worked in 8 years. But you worked in corporate law before that. You understand this world. And frankly, you can't do worse than Brandon's doing right now." Naomi thought about it. Taking over the company would be the ultimate revenge. But it would also be exhausting, complicated, and all-consuming. Did she want that? "Let's see how the divorce plays out first," she said. "But keep the option open." The divorce proceedings began in earnest 2 days later. The courtroom was packed with media, despite the judge's attempts to limit attention. Naomi sat with Gerald and his team on one side. Brandon sat with 3 lawyers on the other. Simone wasn't present. Her case had been separated from the divorce proceedings. It was the first time Naomi had seen Brandon since the incident. He looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Anger? Fear? Regret? Maybe all 3. Judge Martinez, a stern woman in her 60s, called the court to order. "This is a divorce proceeding, not a circus," she said sharply. "I will not tolerate disruptions from anyone, including media. Now let's begin with the basics. Mrs. Whitmore, you're filing for divorce on grounds of adultery, fraud, and abuse. Mr. Whitmore, how do you respond?" Brandon's lead attorney stood. "Your Honor, my client denies all allegations of abuse. The incident involving Mrs. Whitmore was a tragic accident caused by a third party. As for the financial matters, we maintain that all transactions were legitimate business operations that Mrs. Whitmore, who has not worked in corporate environments for nearly a decade, simply doesn't understand." Naomi felt her jaw tighten at the dismissive tone. Gerald stood. "Your Honor, we have extensive evidence to the contrary. May I present the court with documents showing systematic financial fraud, conspiracy to commit assault, and a pattern of manipulation spanning the entire marriage?" "You may." What followed was 3 hours of testimony and document review. Gerald methodically laid out the evidence. The emails between Brandon and Simone planning to handle Naomi. The text messages the morning of the incident. The financial transfers to offshore accounts. The witness statements from the street. The corporate documents showing Naomi's ownership stake that Brandon had tried to hide. Brandon's lawyers tried to counter. They argued the messages were ambiguous, that handling Naomi meant managing a difficult divorce, not assault. They claimed the financial transfers were for international business development. They even tried to argue that Naomi's ownership shares had been invalidated by years of non-participation in the company. But the evidence was too strong. The judge listened to everything with a carefully neutral expression. When the testimony concluded for the day, she spoke. "This court will review all submitted evidence. I'm particularly concerned about the allegations of conspiracy and fraud. Mr. Whitmore, I'm ordering you to submit complete financial records, including all international accounts, within 1 week. Mrs. Whitmore, your ownership stake appears to be legitimate, so I'm maintaining the freeze on all major company transactions until this matter is resolved. We'll reconvene in 10 days. The gavel came down. Outside the courtroom, reporters swarmed. Gerald held up a hand and made a brief statement. My client, Naomi Whitmore, is seeking justice for years of manipulation and a calculated attack on her life. The evidence speaks for itself. We look forward to the court's ruling. Naomi said nothing. She didn't need to. Her presence was enough, standing tall despite her healing injuries, dressed in a sharp navy suit that reminded everyone she was far from the broken victim Brandon had expected. Brandon tried to leave through a side entrance, but reporters caught him anyway. Naomi watched on a phone screen as he was surrounded by cameras and microphones. Mr. Whitmore, how do you respond to the allegations? Mr. Whitmore, is your company going bankrupt? Mr. Whitmore, should you step down as CEO? He said nothing, pushing through to his car. But the damage was done. The image of a man fleeing questions while his wife stood tall in the courthouse would be on every news site by evening. Back in Gerald's office, the team reviewed the day's proceedings. That went as well as we could have hoped, Gerald said. The judge is clearly skeptical of Brandon's claims. And the order to produce all financial records will expose more fraud. He can't hide the offshore accounts now. What about the criminal case? Naomi asked. That's moving forward separately. The DA is building a strong case based on the messages and witness statements. Simone's lawyer is making noise about a plea deal, which means she's willing to testify against Brandon. She'll throw him under the bus to save herself, Naomi predicted. Absolutely. And Brandon's lawyers know it. They're probably advising him to consider a plea deal too, but his ego won't let him. He still thinks he can win this. Tatiana spoke up from where she'd been working on her laptop. You need to see this. It just went up. She turned her screen around. It was a blog post from a tech industry journalist titled The Fall of Brandon Whitmore, How Arrogance Destroyed an Empire. The article was devastating. It detailed not just the current scandal but years of questionable business practices. Former employees came forward anonymously to describe a culture of intimidation and favoritism. Business partners revealed deals that had been ethically dubious. Even some investors expressed doubts about whether Brandon had been honest about company finances. This is destruction, Patricia said quietly. Complete professional destruction. He'll never recover from this. Naomi felt a complex wave of emotions. This was what she'd wanted, wasn't it? To expose Brandon for who he really was? To make sure everyone knew the truth? But there was something sad about watching a person's entire life unravel, even when they deserved it. You're not feeling sorry for him, are you? Tatiana asked, reading her expression. No, Naomi said firmly. I'm just realizing that revenge doesn't feel the way I expected. It's not triumphant. It's just necessary. That's because you're not a cruel person, Gerald said. You're not enjoying his pain. You're ensuring your safety and justice. There's a difference. What's next? Now we wait for the financial disclosure. Once the court sees the full extent of his hidden assets, the divorce settlement will be substantial. Combined with your ownership stake, you'll effectively control his company. And if the criminal case goes well, he'll be facing serious prison time. How long until final judgment on the divorce? A few weeks, maybe a month. But the outcome is clear. You're going to win, Naomi. Completely. That night, Naomi returned to the recovery facility, exhausted but wired. She couldn't sleep, so she stood at the window watching the city lights, thinking about everything that had happened. Her phone buzzed with a message from a number she didn't recognize. You're destroying more than just me. Think about the employees who'll lose their jobs when the company goes under. Think about the investors who'll lose money. Is your revenge worth all that? Brandon. Still trying to manipulate her, even now. Still trying to make her feel guilty for consequences he'd created himself. She typed back, you destroyed your company yourself when you chose fraud and assault. Everything that happens now is on you. Don't try to make me responsible for your choices. His response came quickly, I never meant for you to get hurt. Simone went too far. I was trying to end our marriage quietly, that's all. Naomi almost laughed. Still lying even now. Still pretending he wasn't responsible. I have the messages, Brandon. All of them. I know you paid Simone to handle me. I know you planned this. Stop lying. At least have the courage to admit what you did. No response this time. She blocked the number. Let him stew in his own choices. Let him face the consequences alone, just like he'd been willing to let her die alone on that street. Tomorrow she'd wake up and continue fighting. But tonight she'd sleep knowing she'd already won the most important victory. She'd reclaimed her voice. She'd reclaimed her strength. She'd reclaimed herself. And no amount of his manipulation could take that away again. The financial disclosure arrived exactly 1 week after the judge's order, delivered by courier to Gerald's office in a sealed package. Naomi was there when they opened it, along with Gerald, Patricia, and Tatiana. "This is going to be good," Patricia said, carefully breaking the seal. She wasn't wrong. Brandon's financial records, once spread out across the conference table, told a story of greed, deception, and spectacular stupidity. The offshore accounts contained not just $27 million but closer to $43 million. There were accounts in locations they hadn't even known about: Dubai, Luxembourg, the British Virgin Islands. But that wasn't the most damaging revelation. "Look at this," Gerald said, holding up a document. "He's been embezzling from his own company, taking money from investor funds and corporate reserves and moving it to personal accounts. This isn't just hiding assets from a divorce. This is criminal theft." "How much total?" Naomi asked. Patricia pulled up a calculator. "Over the past 3 years? Approximately $65 million that should have gone to company growth, investor returns, and employee benefits. He's been stealing from everyone." "His investors are going to destroy him," Tatiana observed. As if on cue, Gerald's phone rang. He answered, listened for a moment, then put it on speaker. "Gerald, this is Thomas Chin from Pacific Venture Capital. I'm calling as the lead investor in Whitmore Tech. We've just received the financial disclosure. I need to speak with your client immediately." "I'm here, Mr. Chin," Naomi said. "Go ahead." "Mrs. Whitmore, I'll be direct. Brandon Whitmore has been defrauding our investment group for years. We're filing a lawsuit against him personally for the return of all misappropriated funds. We're also calling for an emergency shareholders meeting to remove him as CEO and from the board entirely. Given your ownership stake, we'd like your support." Naomi glanced at Gerald, who nodded encouragingly. "You have my full support," she said. "When's the meeting?" 3 days from now. I'll send details." "And Mrs. Whitmore?" "Several of us believe you should consider taking an active role in the company's leadership. We need someone who understands corporate law and won't steal from us. Your background makes you ideal." After they hung up, Naomi leaned back in her chair, processing. "This is moving fast." "It's moving exactly as it should," Gerald said. "Brandon's house of cards is collapsing. And the faster it falls, the better for you." "What about Simone?" "Her case is progressing separately, but she's about to face new problems. If Brandon was stealing from the company and she was signing off on transactions, she's complicit in the embezzlement too." "She must have known," Patricia added. "Some of these transfers required executive approval. She was involved at every level." Naomi's phone buzzed. A message from Rachel, the employee who'd first reached out to her. "Things are chaos at the office. Brandon hasn't been seen in days. Simone was escorted out by security this morning. People are scared about their jobs. Is there any way you can give us information about what's happening?" Naomi showed the message to Gerald. "What should I tell her?" "Tell her the truth. The company is being restructured, but jobs are safe. The problem was Brandon, not the business itself." Naomi typed back, "The company will be fine. Change is coming, but it's good change. Hang in there." Rachel's response was immediate. "Thank you. A lot of us are rooting for you." The shareholder meeting 3 days later was held in a downtown conference room rented specifically for the purpose. Naomi walked in wearing a charcoal gray suit, her arm finally free of its cast but still slightly stiff. The room was full of wealthy investors, all looking grim. Brandon sat alone at one end of the long table. No lawyers this time, Naomi noticed. Probably couldn't afford them anymore with his assets frozen. He looked terrible, unshaven and exhausted. When she entered, he met her eyes briefly, then looked away. Thomas Chin called the meeting to order. "We're here to address the financial irregularities discovered in Whitmore Tech's accounts. Mr. Whitmore, you have 5 minutes to explain yourself." Brandon stood slowly. The financial transactions in question were all legitimate business expenses. International expansion requires movement of capital across borders. My soon-to-be ex-wife has twisted these normal business operations into something sinister because she's angry about our divorce. Then explain the $43 million in personal accounts, another investor demanded. How is that business expansion? Those are reserves for future investments. Reserves that were never reported to the board or investors, Thomas interrupted. Reserves that exist only in your name, not the company's. Mr. Whitmore, we've had forensic accountants review everything. You've been systematically stealing from this company. That's a lie. It's documented fact. And given the evidence, we're voting to remove you as CEO effective immediately, strip you of your board seat, and file a lawsuit for recovery of all stolen funds. Mrs. Whitmore, as the second-largest shareholder, how do you vote? All eyes turned to Naomi. Brandon stared at her with an expression somewhere between pleading and hatred. She thought about the woman she'd been 8 years ago. Brilliant, confident, undefeated in court. She thought about how Brandon had slowly, methodically convinced her to give up that woman. To become smaller, quieter, more dependent. She thought about lying on that street, bleeding, while he whispered about maintaining their story. I vote to remove Brandon Whitmore from all positions in this company, she said clearly. And I support the lawsuit for recovery of funds. Motion carries unanimously, Thomas said. Mr. Whitmore, you're fired. Security will escort you from the building. You're not to contact any employees or attempt to access company systems. Your existing company assets, including stock options, are forfeit pending the outcome of the fraud investigation. Brandon stood frozen for a moment. Then he exploded. You're destroying everything I built. This company wouldn't exist without me. I created this from nothing. You created it with Mrs. Whitmore's legal expertise, Thomas shot back. And you destroyed it with your greed. Security, please remove Mr. Whitmore. 2 security guards approached. Brandon looked at Naomi one last time. I hope you're happy, he said bitterly. You've destroyed my life. No, Naomi said quietly. You destroyed your own life. I'm just making sure everyone knows it. As Brandon was let out, Thomas turned to Naomi. Mrs. Whitmore, we'd like to offer you the interim CEO position. You have the legal background to clean up this mess, you're not implicated in any wrongdoing, and frankly the employees trust you more than anyone else right now. What do you say? Naomi hesitated. Taking on this role would be enormous. Demanding. It would consume her life for months, maybe years. But it would also be the ultimate revenge. Taking everything Brandon had built and making it better. Making it honest. Making it hers. I accept, she said. On the condition that we implement immediate reforms. Full financial transparency. Regular audits. And a clear policy against workplace harassment and favoritism. Agreed, Thomas said. Welcome back to the working world, Miss Fletcher. She smiled at the use of her maiden name. Yes, welcome back indeed. The news coverage of Brandon's removal was swift and brutal. Disgraced CEO fired by own company, read one headline. Whitmore Tech appoints fraud victim as new CEO, read another. The business community buzzed with the story. Some praised Naomi's resilience. Others questioned whether someone who'd been out of the workforce for 8 years could really lead a tech company. But most agreed it was a remarkable turn of events. Simone's situation deteriorated rapidly after the shareholder meeting. With Brandon removed from power and unable to protect her, the full extent of her involvement became clear. She'd not only helped move money illegally, but she'd also been receiving substantial kickbacks. The DA added embezzlement charges to her existing conspiracy charges. Her lawyer reached out to Gerald, seeking a deal. Simone is willing to testify against Brandon in both the criminal and civil cases, the lawyer said over the phone. In exchange for reduced charges. What's she offering? Gerald asked. Complete testimony about the planning of the assault. Details about the financial fraud. Everything she knows. Naomi listened on speakerphone. Part of her wanted to refuse, to make Simone face the full consequences of her actions. But the practical part of her, the lawyer she used to be, knew that Simone's testimony would seal Brandon's fate completely. What kind of reduction? She asked. She'd plead to 1 count of assault and 1 count of fraud. Likely 3 to 5 years total, with possibility of parole. That's too light, Naomi said. She tried to kill me. I understand your anger, Mrs. Whitmore. But with her testimony, Brandon will serve significantly more time. And you'll have justice. Naomi looked at Gerald, who shrugged. It's your call. She thought for a long moment. Then, fine. But I want a formal apology on record. And she's banned from ever working in corporate environments again. I'll convey your terms. The deal was finalized 2 days later. Simone would testify in exchange for reduced charges. Her testimony was scheduled for the following week. Meanwhile, Naomi stepped into her new role at Whitmore Tech. The first day was overwhelming. Hundreds of employees, dozens of ongoing projects, complex financial systems that needed immediate attention. But as she sat in the CEO's office, looking at the city through floor-to-ceiling windows, something clicked into place. She remembered how to do this. How to manage people. How to make difficult decisions. How to lead. She'd just been asleep. Now she was wide awake. Her first major decision was to rename the company. Whitmore Tech is tainted, she told the board. We need a fresh start. I propose Fletcher Technologies. The vote was unanimous. Brandon's unraveling was complete. Fired from his company. Facing criminal charges. About to lose everything in the divorce. Betrayed by his co-conspirator who was now testifying against him. But Naomi wasn't celebrating. She was too busy building something new from the ashes of what he destroyed. Revenge, she was learning, wasn't about destruction. It was about rising so far above your enemies that they became irrelevant. The criminal trial began on a cold morning in late autumn. Naomi sat in the gallery with Tatiana and Gerald, watching as Brandon was led into the courtroom in a dark suit that hung looser than it should have. He'd lost weight. His face was haggard, eyes shadowed. He looked like a man who already knew he was defeated. Simone sat at the prosecution's table, dressed conservatively and looking small. Her testimony would be the cornerstone of the case against Brandon. Judge Patricia Torres presided, a no-nonsense former prosecutor who'd built her reputation on corporate crime cases. The jury had been selected carefully, 8 women, 4 men, diverse in age and background. People who'd understand betrayal. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Catherine Mills, stood for her opening statement. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about power, greed, and violence. Brandon Whitmore is a man who had everything: wealth, success, a loving wife. But it wasn't enough. He wanted more. So he conspired with his mistress to remove his wife from his life in the most brutal way possible. He planned to have her pushed into traffic, injured so severely she couldn't fight his divorce terms or discover his financial crimes. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was calculated, cold-blooded, and nearly fatal. We will prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Brandon Whitmore is guilty of conspiracy to commit assault, fraud, and embezzlement. Brandon's lawyer, a tired-looking man named Robert Green, stood for his response. The prosecution wants you to believe my client is a monster. But the truth is far simpler. Brandon Whitmore made mistakes in his personal life. He had an affair which he deeply regrets. But he did not conspire to hurt anyone. The incident involving Miss Fletcher was a tragic accident caused by an unstable woman acting on her own. The financial transactions the prosecution calls fraud were legitimate business operations misunderstood by people without technical expertise. My client is guilty of adultery and poor judgment, nothing more. The first days of testimony established the basics. Witnesses from the street described seeing Simone push Naomi deliberately. Emergency responders described Naomi's injuries. Doctors testified about the severity of the impact. Then Simone took the stand. She looked small in the witness box, younger than her years. Catherine approached her gently. Ms. Delacroix, can you tell us about your relationship with the defendant? Brandon and I started an affair about 8 months before the incident, Simone said quietly. He hired me at Whitmore Tech and promoted me rapidly. He said he was going to leave his wife. And did he explain why he wanted to leave her? He said she was holding him back. That she didn't understand his business ambitions. He talked about her like she was an obstacle. When did discussions about harming Miss Fletcher begin? Simone took a breath. About 3 weeks before it happened. Brandon told me there was going to be a business sale worth billions. But his wife owned part of the company and she'd have to sign off on it. He was worried she'd find out about the affair and refuse to cooperate. He needed her out of the way. What did he mean by out of the way? At first, he talked about convincing her to sign quickly, before she understood what she was signing. But then he said that wouldn't work. She used to be a lawyer. She'd read everything carefully. So he suggested making her unable to think clearly. How? Trauma. He said if she was dealing with a serious injury, she'd be too overwhelmed to fight. He asked me to help. And you agreed? Simone's voice broke. Yes. I thought he loved me. I thought we were building a future together. He paid me $50,000 to handle the situation. I knew what that meant. Did Mr. Whitmore specifically instruct you to push Miss Fletcher into traffic? Not in those exact words. But he told me to make sure she was injured badly enough that she couldn't function normally for months. He said it had to look accidental. He told me they'd be walking downtown on a specific day, and he'd position her near the street. All I had to do was push at the right moment. The courtroom was silent except for the court reporters typing. Did you have any hesitation? Catherine asked. Yes. But Brandon convinced me it was the only way. He said she'd be fine eventually. That we were just making her too busy to cause problems. Simone wiped tears from her face. I was wrong. I was so wrong. I could have killed her. Why are you testifying today? Because I realized Brandon was using me. He never loved me. I was just a tool. And what we did to Miss Fletcher was unforgivable. I want to take responsibility for my part. Brandon's lawyer cross-examined aggressively. Ms. Delacroix, you're testifying in exchange for a reduced sentence, correct? Yes. So you have significant motivation to lie about my client's involvement. I'm not lying. I have messages, emails, everything proving Brandon planned this. Messages that could be interpreted multiple ways. Maybe you misunderstood his intent. I didn't misunderstand. He paid me to hurt her. Or maybe you acted alone, and now you're trying to drag him down with you. Why would I hurt a woman I didn't even know? I had no reason to want Naomi dead. Only Brandon did. The cross-examination continued for hours, but Simone held firm. Her testimony was consistent, detailed, and damning. When Naomi took the stand the next day, the courtroom was packed. Media had been allowed one camera, and the footage would be broadcast everywhere. Catherine guided her through the testimony gently. Miss Fletcher, can you describe what happened the day you were injured? Naomi spoke clearly, keeping her emotions controlled. She described discovering the affair, confronting Brandon, the argument on the street. Then Simone's hands on her back, the push, the impact. What do you remember after being struck by the car? Pain. Confusion. And then hearing Brandon and Simone talking as I lay on the ground. What did they say? Brandon told Simone to stick to the story. That they needed everyone to think it was an accident. And Simone said this actually works out perfectly, because now they didn't need to wait for a divorce. How did that make you feel? For the first time, Naomi's voice cracked. Like I was lying on the street dying, and my husband was standing over me planning how to benefit from it. Like 8 years of marriage meant nothing. Like I meant nothing. What happened when you were in the hospital? I pretended to be more injured than I was. I overheard Brandon and Simone discussing their plans. He said I'd be too traumatized to fight the divorce. That I didn't have the spine for a real battle. That's when I decided to fight back. The cross-examination tried to paint her as vengeful, as twisting innocent conversations into conspiracy theories. But Naomi had been a lawyer. She knew how to testify. She stayed calm, factual, and let the evidence speak for itself. The financial fraud case was presented next. Forensic accountants showed the jury exactly how Brandon had moved money, hidden assets, and stolen from investors. The numbers were staggering. The deception was clear. Then the prosecution rested. Brandon's defense was weak. They called character witnesses who described him as a good businessman, a visionary, someone who made mistakes but wasn't a criminal. But none of them could explain away the messages, the financial records, or Simone's testimony. Brandon himself didn't testify. His lawyer advised against it. Closing arguments came 2 weeks after the trial began. Brandon Whitmore believed he was above the law, Catherine told the jury. He believed his wealth and power meant he could hurt people without consequences. He conspired to assault his wife. He stole millions from investors. He lied to everyone who trusted him. The evidence is overwhelming. Find him guilty and show him that no one is above justice. Brandon's lawyer tried one last time. My client made mistakes. But mistakes aren't crimes. Find him not guilty of conspiracy, and let the civil courts handle the financial disputes. Don't send a man to prison based on the testimony of a woman trying to save herself. The jury deliberated for 3 days. When they returned, the courtroom was silent. Brandon stood, his hands trembling. On the count of conspiracy to commit assault, how do you find? Guilty. Brandon's face went white. On the count of fraud? Guilty. On the count of embezzlement? Guilty. Brandon's knees buckled. His lawyer caught him. Judge Torres scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later. Brandon was remanded to custody immediately, bail revoked given the guilty verdict and flight risk. As he was led away in handcuffs, he looked at Naomi one last time. She met his gaze steadily, her expression neutral. She felt no triumph, no joy. Just a quiet satisfaction that justice had been served. The divorce proceedings concluded the following week. With Brandon's criminal conviction, the divorce was straightforward. Naomi was awarded the penthouse, a substantial financial settlement, and full control of her shares in Fletcher Technologies. Brandon was ordered to pay restitution to defrauded investors, which would consume any remaining assets he had. Judge Martinez, presiding over the divorce, addressed Brandon directly. Mr. Whitmore, your actions in this case have been reprehensible. You betrayed your wife, conspired to harm her, and stole from countless people who trusted you. This court finds you owe Miss Fletcher everything she's requested, plus additional damages for pain and suffering. You'll leave this marriage with nothing but the consequences of your choices. Simone was sentenced separately. 3 years in prison for assault and fraud, with parole possible after 18 months. She'd have to serve her time, but it was significantly less than the 15 years Brandon received. 15 years. Brandon would be almost 60 when he got out. His empire was gone. His reputation destroyed. His freedom taken. And Naomi? She was free. Walking out of the courthouse after the final sentencing, she felt lighter than she had in years. The media swarmed, but she'd prepared a statement. Justice has been served. Brandon Whitmore and Simone Delacroix have been held accountable for their actions. I'm grateful to the jury, the judges, and everyone who supported me through this process. Now I'm looking forward to the future and continuing to build Fletcher Technologies into a company based on integrity and transparency. Thank you. Tatiana walked beside her to the waiting car. How does it feel? Surreal, Naomi admitted. I keep expecting to wake up back in that hospital bed, hearing them plot against me. You're awake. You're alive. And you won. Yeah, Naomi said, looking back at the courthouse. I did. But winning, she was learning, was just the beginning. Now she had to figure out what to do with her victory. 6 months after the trial, Fletcher Technologies had been transformed. The company that Brandon had nearly destroyed through greed and fraud was now thriving under Naomi's leadership. The stock price had recovered and then climbed. New clients signed on, attracted by the company's renewed reputation for integrity. Employees felt valued again. Naomi sat in her office on the 20th floor, reviewing quarterly reports. The numbers were strong. They'd exceeded projections by 12%. Investment groups that had fled during the scandal were returning, bringing fresh capital. Knock knock, Tatiana said from the doorway. She'd become Fletcher Technologies' chief operating officer, leaving her old law firm to join Naomi's venture. Got a minute? Always. What's up? I've been thinking about your foundation idea. The one for women who've survived domestic violence and workplace abuse. Naomi had mentioned it in passing a few months ago, but with everything else happening, she'd put it on hold. What about it? We should move forward. You have the platform now. You have the resources. And there are thousands of women who need support. Women like Rachel and the others who came forward during the trial. Naomi considered it. The foundation would be substantial work on top of running the company. But it also felt right, like the final piece of taking something terrible and making something good from it. Okay, she said. Let's do it. But I want it done properly. Full funding, real programs, partnerships with legal aid and counseling services. Not just a vanity project. I'll start pulling together a proposal. After Tatiana left, Naomi walked to the window. The city spread out below, bustling and alive. She'd lived here for over a decade, but somehow it looked different now. Brighter. Full of possibility instead of obligation. Her phone rang. Her mother, calling from across the country. Naomi. I saw the article in the business section. Forbes named you one of the most influential businesswomen of the year. I saw that, Naomi said, smiling. Feels weird. It feels deserved. I'm so proud of you, honey. Not just for the business success, but for how you handled everything. You were always strong, even when Brandon tried to convince you otherwise. I forgot for a while. We all forget sometimes. What matters is you remembered. After the call, Naomi returned to her desk and opened her email. One message caught her attention. An invitation to speak at a conference for women in business. The topic, Rising from Crisis, Building Success After Trauma. She almost declined. Talking about what had happened still hurt. But then she thought about all the women who'd reached out to her over the past months. Women in bad marriages. Women who'd given up careers for partners who didn't value them. Women who'd been made to feel small. She accepted the invitation. The conference was 3 weeks later, held at a convention center downtown. Naomi stood backstage, nervous in a way she hadn't been since her first courtroom appearance years ago. You'll be great, Tatiana assured her. Just tell the truth. The auditorium was full, maybe 500 women, all watching expectantly as Naomi walked onto the stage. She stood at the podium looking out at the sea of faces. Then she began. 8 years ago, I was one of the best corporate attorneys in this city. Then I fell in love, got married, and slowly let someone convince me to give up everything that made me strong. It happened so gradually I didn't even notice. A suggestion here, a criticism there. Before I knew it, I'd quit my job, lost my friends, and become someone I didn't recognize. The room was silent. Then, 6 months ago, my husband's mistress pushed me into traffic. The impact broke my arm, cracked my ribs, and left me bleeding on the pavement. But the worst injury was hearing my husband, the man I'd trusted with my life, tell his mistress to stick to their story. To let everyone believe it was an accident. In that moment, I realized I'd been living in a cage I'd helped build. She paused, gathering herself. So I stopped being the person he'd convinced me I was. I remembered who I'd been before. And I fought back. I exposed his fraud. I took his company. I sent him to prison. And I rebuilt my life from scratch. I'm not telling you this to brag. I'm telling you because some of you are where I was. You've given up pieces of yourself for someone else. You've accepted less than you deserve. You've forgotten who you were before someone told you who to be. Her voice strengthened. I'm here to remind you, you're stronger than you think. Smarter than they've told you. More capable than they've let you believe. And it's never too late to remember who you are and take your life back. The applause was thunderous. Several women in the audience were crying. During the Q&A, a young woman in the third row stood. How did you find the courage to fight back? I'm in a similar situation and I'm terrified of leaving. Naomi looked at her directly. The courage came from realizing I had nothing left to lose. He'd already taken everything. The only question was whether I'd let him keep it. But here's the secret. You don't need to wait until you hit rock bottom. You can choose yourself right now. Today. This moment. And there are people who will help you. Lawyers, counselors, friends. You're not alone. The woman nodded, wiping her eyes. After the conference, dozens of women approached Naomi. They shared their stories, asked for advice, thanked her for speaking. Each conversation reminded her why she was doing this. The foundation launched 2 months later. The Fletcher Foundation for Women's Empowerment. It provided free legal services for women escaping abuse, career counseling for those re-entering the workforce, and small business grants for female entrepreneurs. Tatiana ran operations while Naomi served as the face and primary fundraiser. The first month they helped 17 women. The second month 32. By 6 months they had a wait list. We need to expand, Tatiana said during a board meeting. Maybe open locations in other cities. Let's focus on doing this city right first, Naomi said. Quality over quantity. Spoken like a true CO. Life settled into a rhythm. Work during the day, foundation events several evenings a week, physical therapy to fully heal from her injuries. Naomi dated casually, nothing serious. She was rediscovering who she was as an individual before adding a partner to the equation. One evening she returned to the penthouse, the one she'd won in the divorce. She'd redecorated completely, removing every trace of Brandon. New furniture, new art, new colors. It felt like hers now. She poured a glass of wine and stood at the window looking at the city lights. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Her heart skipped, remembering the threatening messages from before. But when she opened it, the message was different. Miss Fletcher, you don't know me. My name is Jessica. I was at your conference last month. I want you to know that your speech gave me the courage to leave my abusive marriage. I filed for divorce last week. I'm scared, but I'm free. Thank you for showing me it was possible. Naomi felt tears sting her eyes. She typed back, you did the hard part yourself. I just reminded you of your strength. You're going to be okay. If you need legal help, contact the Fletcher Foundation. We're here for you. The response came quickly, already did. Your team is amazing. Thank you for existing. Naomi set down her phone and smiled. This was what rising from the ashes meant. Not just rebuilding her own life but helping others rebuild theirs. Brandon had tried to destroy her, and instead he'd forged her into something stronger. The doorbell rang, surprising her. She checked the security monitor. Tatiana stood there, holding what looked like takeout containers. Did we have plans? Naomi asked, opening the door. Nope. But I figured you'd be working late and forget to eat again. I brought Chinese food. They ate on the couch, talking about expansion plans for the foundation, difficult personnel decisions at the company, and Tatiana's new relationship with a woman she'd met at a charity gala. What about you? Tatiana asked. Any romance on the horizon? Not really looking, Naomi admitted. I'm still figuring out who I am without someone else defining me. That's healthy. But don't close yourself off forever. You deserve love. Real love, from someone who sees your strength as a feature, not a threat. Maybe someday. Right now, I'm focused on building something that matters. You already have. After Tatiana left, Naomi returned to the window. The city stretched endlessly, lights glittering like stars. Somewhere out there, Brandon sat in a prison cell, his empire destroyed, his freedom gone. Simone served her time in a different facility, probably regretting every decision that had led her there. But Naomi stood here, free and strong and successful beyond anything Brandon had ever achieved. She'd won. Not through destruction or cruelty, but by rising so far above him that his attempts to bring her down had only made her soar higher. And the best part? She was just getting started. Tomorrow she'd wake up and continue building. Continue helping. Continue growing. Because the best revenge wasn't hurting the people who'd hurt you. It was becoming so successful, so happy, so fulfilled that they became irrelevant. And Brandon? He was already fading into irrelevance, while Naomi was just beginning to shine. 1 year after the incident, Naomi stood on the rooftop terrace of Fletcher Technologies headquarters, looking out at the sunset painting the city in shades of purple and amber. The building was new, purchased and renovated as part of the company's expansion. 30 floors of glass and steel, humming with innovation and energy. Below, the city buzzed with evening activity. People heading home from work, couples meeting for dinner, life unfolding in all its messy, beautiful complexity. There you are. Tatiana emerged from the rooftop entrance, carrying 2 glasses of champagne. The gala starts in an hour. You need to get ready. Tonight was the Fletcher Foundation's first annual fundraiser, a black tie event expected to raise over $2 million for women's programs. The guest list included CEOs, politicians, celebrities, and hundreds of women whose lives had been changed by the foundation's work. I'm ready, Naomi said, accepting a glass. Just needed a moment. Big night. Huge night. Naomi sipped the champagne. You know what's strange? A year ago, I was lying in a hospital bed thinking my life was over. And now you're one of the most powerful businesswomen in the city, running a foundation that's helped over 300 women, and about to be honored at your own gala. Yeah, pretty strange. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Any word on Brandon? Naomi asked. He's appealing the sentence. Won't go anywhere. His lawyers are just going through the motions. Tatiana's expression was neutral. Simone gets out in 6 months. She's been taking classes in prison, apparently trying to turn her life around. Good for her, I guess. You don't sound convinced. I'm not angry anymore, Naomi said thoughtfully. I'm just indifferent. They're not part of my life anymore. They're barely even memories now. That's real healing. 2 hours later, Naomi stood in a flowing midnight blue gown, greeting guests as they arrived at the ballroom of the Grandview Hotel. The same hotel where she'd confronted Brandon about his affair. She'd chosen the location deliberately, reclaiming a place of pain and transforming it into a celebration of survival. The ballroom was stunning. Crystal chandeliers, white roses everywhere, a jazz band playing softly. Guests mingled, sipping cocktails and admiring the silent auction items. Rachel, the employee who'd first reached out to Naomi, approached with a smile. She'd been promoted to senior management at Fletcher Technologies and was thriving. This is incredible, Rachel said. You've built something amazing. We've built it, Naomi corrected. Everyone here is part of this. Throughout the evening, Naomi circulated through the crowd. She spoke with donors, thanked volunteers, and listened to stories from women the foundation had helped. Each conversation reminded her why this work mattered. Then she saw him. A man stood near the bar, watching her with an expression of quiet interest. He was tall, maybe 40, with kind eyes and an easy smile. When their gazes met, he raised his glass slightly in greeting. Naomi found herself walking over. Hi, she said. I'm Naomi Fletcher. I know who you are, he said warmly. Everyone here knows who you are. I'm Julian Cross. I'm an architect. I designed the renovations for your new building. You did beautiful work. Thank you. But I think the real beauty is what happens inside the building. I've been following Fletcher Technologies' story. What you've accomplished in a year is extraordinary. They talked for 20 minutes, conversation flowing easily. Julian had his own story she learned. He'd lost his first wife to cancer 5 years ago, taken time to heal, and recently started engaging with life again through charity work and his architecture practice. I admire what you're doing with the foundation, he said. Using your platform to help others instead of just celebrating your own success. That takes character. I had help remembering who I was, Naomi said. Now I'm trying to help others remember who they are too. Before she could say more, Tatiana appeared at her elbow. Sorry to interrupt, but it's time for your speech. Naomi excused herself, but Julian said, I'll be listening. On stage, under bright lights, Naomi looked out at the hundreds of faces watching her. She'd written and rewritten her speech a dozen times, trying to find the right words. In the end, she spoke from the heart. A year ago, someone tried to kill me. Not out of passion or rage, but from cold calculation. They wanted me gone because I was inconvenient. Because I owned something they wanted. Because I was in the way. The room was silent. For a long time, I blamed myself. I thought I should have seen it coming. Should have been smarter, stronger, more careful. But I've learned something important. When someone treats you badly, it says nothing about your worth and everything about their character. She paused, finding her rhythm. The Fletcher Foundation exists because I'm not the only woman who's been made to feel small. Who's been told she's not good enough, smart enough, strong enough. Who's given up pieces of herself to please someone who never valued her anyway. We're all recovering from something. A bad relationship. A lost career. Years of being told we're less than we are. But here's what I want you to know. Your past doesn't define your future. Your lowest moment doesn't determine your worth. And it's never too late to reclaim your life and remember your strength. The applause was overwhelming. People stood, clapping and cheering. Some were crying. Naomi felt her own tears threatening but held them back. So tonight we're not just raising money. We're building a community of women who refuse to stay small. Who lift each other up. Who remember and remind each other of our collective power. Thank you for being part of this. Thank you for believing that we all deserve better. And thank you for helping make that better possible. As she left the stage, the room erupted again in applause. The rest of the evening was a blur of congratulations, photographs, and emotional conversations. By the time the gala ended, Naomi was exhausted but fulfilled. Julian found her as guests were leaving. That was a powerful speech, he said. You're quite remarkable, Miss Fletcher. Thank you. And please call me Naomi. Naomi. He smiled. I was wondering if you'd like to have coffee sometime. Just coffee, no pressure. I'd enjoy getting to know you better. Naomi hesitated. Part of her wanted to say no, to stay focused on her work and her healing. But another part, the part that was ready to fully embrace life again, wanted to say yes. I'd like that, she said. But I should warn you, I'm not looking for anything complicated. I'm still figuring out who I am. I'm not offering anything complicated. Just conversation and maybe some good coffee. She laughed. Okay then. Yes. They exchanged numbers. As Julian left, Tatiana appeared with a knowing smile. Was that a date I just witnessed being arranged? Maybe. Or maybe just coffee with a nice architect. Either way, it's progress. You're letting yourself live again. 3 months later, Naomi and Julian had settled into an easy rhythm. Coffee once a week, sometimes dinner, occasionally attending events together. It wasn't intense or dramatic. It was comfortable, respectful, and slowly becoming something real. I like that you don't need me, Julian said one evening as they walked along the waterfront. You're not looking for someone to complete you or fix you. You're already whole. Took me a while to get here, Naomi admitted. But yeah, I'm whole now. If we're together, it's because we choose to be, not because either of us needs rescuing. That's the best kind of relationship. Fletcher Technologies continued to thrive. The company won several prestigious contracts, expanded to 2 new cities, and was consistently rated as one of the best places to work in the tech industry. Naomi had instituted policies protecting employees from harassment and favoritism, ensuring what happened under Brandon's leadership could never happen again. The foundation grew too. They opened a second location, partnered with law schools to provide pro bono services, and started a mentorship program pairing successful businesswomen with those just starting their careers. On the anniversary of the incident, Naomi walked to the street corner where it had happened. She'd avoided this spot for a year, but now she needed to face it. The intersection looked ordinary. Cars passing, pedestrians rushing by, nothing to indicate that a life had nearly ended here. She stood for a long moment, remembering the fear, the pain, the sound of brakes. Then she took a deep breath and let it go. That version of Naomi, the one who'd been pushed into traffic, was gone. She'd survived, but she'd also transformed. The woman standing here now was stronger, wiser, more certain of who she was and what she valued. Goodbye, she whispered to her former self. Thanks for surviving. I've got it from here. She turned and walked away, not looking back. A text from Julian appeared on her phone. Dinner tonight? My place. I'll cook. She smiled and typed back, sounds perfect. Life, Naomi had learned, wasn't about the absence of pain. It was about what you built from that pain. The person you became. The people you helped. The legacy you created. Brandon had tried to destroy her, but instead he'd given her the greatest gift, the chance to completely rebuild herself into someone authentic, powerful, and genuinely happy. That evening, sitting in Julian's apartment eating homemade pasta and laughing at his terrible jokes, Naomi realized something profound. She'd won. Not just the legal battles or the business success, but something more important. She'd won her life back. And she was just getting started. Somewhere across the city, Brandon sat in a prison cell, counting the years until possible parole. Simone would be released soon, but her career and reputation were destroyed. They'd both learned to live with the consequences of their choices. But Naomi? She was free. Truly, completely free. And as she looked at Julian across the dinner table, saw the warmth and respect in his eyes, felt the genuine happiness blooming in her chest, she knew with absolute certainty. The best revenge wasn't hurting the people who'd hurt you. It was building a life so full, so rich, so genuinely joyful that they became nothing more than a footnote in your story. A story that was far from over. A story she was writing on her own terms. A story with a genuinely happy ending.